Most people chasing a Texas beach retirement make the same quiet mistake. They follow popularity instead of livability. Galveston, Texas and South Padre Island, Texas sound perfect until higher home prices, tourist crowds, insurance costs, and seasonal chaos turn daily life into work. What surprised me when researching this is how often retirees feel drained after the honeymoon phase. Popular beach towns optimize for visitors, not residents. Meanwhile, quieter Texas coastal towns stretch retirement dollars, reduce stress, and feel livable year-round. If you're thinking, I want calm, not crowds, you're already closer to the smarter move than most people realize. Galveston, Texas. The dream versus the reality. Galveston, Texas feels like the obvious Texas beach retirement dream. And that's exactly where many people get tripped up. The image is seductive. Historic homes, palm-lined streets, walkable beaches, seafood dinners by the water, and the feeling that you're living where others vacation. What surprised me when researching Galveston more deeply is how different the everyday reality can feel once the novelty wears off. Yes, Galveston's overall cost of living is lower than many coastal cities nationwide, and housing can look affordable at first glance compared to Florida or California. But that number hides a split reality. Inland neighborhoods and older homes can be reasonably priced, while anything close to the water carries a steep premium that keeps climbing as tourism demand grows. Many retirees come expecting beach town affordable and end up recalculating once they see property taxes, maintenance costs on older coastal homes, and insurance expenses tied to wind and flood exposure. This is the part nobody brings up in casual retirement conversations. But it matters when you're living on a fixed income. Another reality check comes from Galveston's rhythm. With a population large enough to feel like a real city and tourism that swells throughout the year, daily life often blends resident routines with visitor traffic. Errands that feel simple on paper can feel slower and louder than expected during busy seasons. And some retirees quietly admit the town feels more like a destination than a retreat. You'll notice Galveston works best for people who enjoy constant activity, events, and energy, not necessarily those craving deep quiet and predictability. Healthcare access is solid, amenities are plentiful, and there's no denying the historic charm and coastal access. But here's the weird part most people don't anticipate. Galveston asks you to compromise more than you expect. You trade serenity for convenience, affordability for visibility, and calm for constant motion. Locals often say, Galveston is a fantastic place to live if you love being where things happen, but a challenging place if your retirement goal is peace, routine, and mental quiet. The dream isn't fake, but it's selective. Galveston, Texas isn't a bad retirement choice, but it's rarely the smartest one unless you truly want a lively coastal city and are prepared for the financial and lifestyle trade-offs that come with being one of the most talked about beach towns on the Texas coast. South Padre Island, Texas. Why it works, until it doesn't. South Padre Island, Texas is one of those places that instantly feels like retirement success when you first arrive. The beaches are wide and walkable, the weather stays warm, the Gulf views feel endless, and the idea of waking up near the water every day hits something deep. Honestly, it makes sense why people fall for it quickly. South Padre offers real beach town infrastructure, plenty of condos, easy access to fishing, birding, and water activities, and a slower pace once the crowds thin out. What surprised me while researching South Padre more closely is that it actually does work very well for retirees at first, especially for those who want an active coastal lifestyle without leaving Texas. Housing options range from condos to single-family homes, and compared to many national beach destinations, prices can still feel approachable depending on location and building age. Healthcare access is reasonable for a town its size, and daily life can feel simple and relaxed during off-peak periods. This is the version of South Padre most people imagine. And it's real. Here's the weird part though. South Padre is a town that changes personalities depending on the calendar. Seasonal tourism is not just noticeable, it reshapes the entire rhythm of the island. During busy stretches, traffic increases, restaurants feel packed, prices climb, and the atmosphere shifts from calm coastal living to destination energy. Some retirees enjoy that buzz at first, but many quietly realize later that living full-time in a place designed around tourism requires more patience than expected. You'll notice errands take longer. Quiet mornings become less predictable, and the sense of community can feel fragmented because so much of the population cycles in and out. Insurance and maintenance costs also play a bigger role than many retirees anticipate, especially for condo owners dealing with coastal exposure and association fees that rise over time. Locals often say South Padre works best if you choose the right part of the island and go in knowing exactly what lifestyle you're signing up for. If you secretly value routine, deep quiet, and consistency, this town can start to feel exhausting after the honeymoon phase. South Padre Island, Texas delivers beauty, access, and excitement better than almost any Texas beach town. But it stops working when what you really want is stillness instead of stimulation. Port Aransas, Texas. Still popular, but quietly changing. Port Aransas, Texas has a reputation that feels instantly familiar to anyone dreaming of a relaxed Texas beach retirement. It looks like the perfect middle ground. Real Gulf beaches, strong fishing culture, walkable areas, and a town small enough to feel personal, but active enough to stay interesting. Honestly, it works better than many people expect at first. The beach access is easy, the community feels friendly, and daily life revolves around water, weather, and simple routines that retirees often crave. What surprised me when researching Port Aransas more closely is how much the town has quietly changed beneath that charming surface. Popularity has reshaped the housing market here. Home prices have climbed well above what many retirees assume when they think small beach town, especially near the water, as second home buyers and short-term rentals compete for limited space on Mustang Island. That demand pushes values higher and shrinks options for those hoping to settle long-term on a fixed income. You'll notice Port Aransas also runs on 2 different speeds. During quieter stretches, it feels peaceful and easy, with uncrowded beaches and a slower pace that makes retirement feel exactly right. During busy seasons, traffic thickens, restaurants fill up, and the town's energy shifts toward visitors rather than residents. Some retirees enjoy that vibrancy, but others realize later they were hoping for consistency, not constant fluctuation. Insurance costs tied to coastal exposure and storm risk can also surprise new homeowners, adding a layer of expense that doesn't show up in casual research. Locals often say Port Aransas works best if you accept its dual personality instead of fighting it. This is still a wonderful place to live if you want an active beach town with real culture, but it's no longer the sleepy, underpriced coastal hideaway many imagine. Port Aransas, Texas remains popular for good reason, but that popularity is exactly what makes it a smarter fit for some retirees and a frustrating mismatch for others who expected quieter, cheaper coastal living. Rockport, Texas. The balanced Texas coast. Rockport, Texas is where a lot of people accidentally discover what they were actually searching for all along. It doesn't shout for attention like some Gulf Coast towns, and that's exactly why it works. What surprised me when researching Rockport is how consistently it shows up as a long-term fit for retirees who want the beach without the burnout. The town sits on Aransas Bay rather than directly on the open Gulf, which immediately changes the experience. You get calmer water, fewer storm surges, and a lifestyle that feels coastal without being chaotic. Housing prices here remain noticeably lower than in more hyped Texas beach towns, especially when you compare similar square footage or proximity to the water. That affordability isn't an accident. Rockport never tried to become a spring break destination or a short-term rental hotspot, and that decision quietly protected its housing market and community feel. You'll notice daily life here moves at a steady, predictable pace. Traffic stays manageable. Errands feel easy. And most people recognize each other after a while. Healthcare access is solid for a town its size, with nearby medical facilities and larger hospitals within a reasonable drive, which matters more than beachfront views once retirement becomes real life instead of a brochure. The local economy leans toward art, fishing, small businesses, and tourism that feels seasonal but not overwhelming. Locals say Rockport rewards people who want routine, community, and space to breathe. Here's the weird part. Rockport feels more relaxing the longer you live there, not less. Many retirees expect boredom in quieter towns, but Rockport fills that gap with nature, walkability, cultural events, and a surprising art scene that keeps life interesting without feeling loud. Insurance and maintenance costs tend to be more manageable than in barrier island towns, and the overall cost of living stays grounded enough to make fixed incomes feel secure. Rockport, Texas ends up being the balanced Texas coast choice because it doesn't force you to trade affordability for beauty or calm for convenience. It's not flashy, it's functional, and for retirement, that balance often turns out to be the smartest move. Surfside Beach, Texas. Where time feels optional. Surfside Beach, Texas is one of those places that feels like it exists slightly outside the normal rules of coastal living. And that's exactly why it catches retirees off guard in a good way. Sitting just south of the greater Houston area, Surfside manages to stay remarkably low-key for a town with direct Gulf access. What surprised me when researching Surfside is how intentionally simple life feels here. This isn't a polished resort town or a master-planned coastal community. It's a working residential beach town where the days blur together because there's very little pushing you to rush. Housing prices remain more approachable than many better-known Texas beach towns, especially for homes that are still within walking distance of the water, which immediately puts Surfside on the radar for retirees who want real beach access without premium pricing. The town is small, quiet, and lightly developed, which keeps both traffic and noise minimal compared with larger coastal destinations. You'll notice there's no pressure to fill your calendar here. Daily life revolves around tides, weather, and personal routines rather than events and crowds. That slower rhythm is exactly what some retirees crave. But here's the part you have to be honest about. Surfside rewards people who are comfortable with fewer conveniences. Dining options are limited, shopping is basic, and major medical facilities require a drive inland. Locals often say Surfside works best for people who value space, independence, and calm over entertainment and variety. Coastal exposure still means wind, storms, and insurance considerations, but the absence of dense development keeps costs more predictable than in highly commercialized beach towns. The sense of community here is real, partly because the population is small enough that people actually notice each other. Surfside Beach, Texas feels like a place where retirement doesn't revolve around plans, schedules, or expectations. Time really does feel optional, which is either deeply relaxing or quietly unsettling depending on what you're looking for. For retirees who want simplicity, affordability, and an unfiltered beach lifestyle, Surfside offers something rare on the Texas coast: the freedom to slow down without feeling like you're missing out. Port Lavaca, Texas. The anti-crowd beach town, Port Lavaca. Texas is the kind of coastal town most people drive past without realizing it might be exactly what they've been looking for. Sitting on Matagorda Bay rather than the open Gulf, Port Lavaca trades crashing waves and tourist energy for calm water, working docks, and a pace of life that feels intentionally unhurried. What surprised me when researching Port Lavaca is how clearly it rejects the crowd-driven beach town model. This place isn't built around vacationers, and that decision shapes everything from housing prices to daily stress levels. Homes here remain noticeably more affordable than in popular Texas beach destinations, even those only a short drive away. Waterfront access exists without the premium pricing that usually comes with it, which immediately changes the retirement math for anyone living on a fixed income. You'll notice daily life feels practical and grounded, traffic stays light, errands are simple, and there's no seasonal personality shift where the town suddenly feels like it belongs to someone else. Locals say Port Lavaca rewards people who value consistency over excitement, and that shows in the tight-knit community and slower rhythm. Healthcare access is solid for a town its size, with local facilities handling routine needs and larger medical centers within reasonable driving distance. The coastal setting still delivers fishing, boating, birdwatching, and waterfront sunsets, but without the constant noise and congestion found in more famous beach towns. Here's the honest part many people need to hear. Port Lavaca won't entertain you. Dining options are limited, nightlife is minimal, and shopping is basic. For some retirees, that feels like a drawback. For others, it's the entire appeal. Port Lavaca, Texas works best for people who want peace, affordability, and a town that feels like it belongs to its residents rather than its visitors. If crowds quietly drain you and predictability feels comforting, this anti-crowd beach town starts making a lot of sense. Fulton, Texas. The town that rewards slowing down. Fulton, Texas, is one of those rare coastal towns that quietly filters out people who aren't ready to slow down, which is exactly why it works so well for the ones who are. Sitting on Aransas Bay just across from Rockport, Fulton feels coastal without feeling exposed, and that subtle difference shapes the entire retirement experience. What surprised me when researching Fulton more deeply is how intentional the town's pace feels. This is not a place that grew by accident or hype. It grew slowly, cautiously, and in a way that protects the people who live there full-time. Housing prices here tend to stay more stable than in trend-driven Texas beach towns, because Fulton never leaned hard into short-term rentals or high-volume tourism. That stability matters when you're planning a retirement budget that needs to hold up over time. Many homes are older, modest, and practical rather than flashy, which keeps entry costs lower and maintenance expectations realistic. You'll notice Fulton trades oceanfront drama for bayfront calm. The water here is smoother, storms feel less aggressive, and everyday coastal risks tend to be more manageable than in barrier island towns. Daily life in Fulton unfolds without pressure. Traffic stays light even during busy seasons. Errands rarely feel rushed, and the town never flips into a tourist-first personality that makes residents feel like outsiders in their own community. Locals tend to know each other, and that familiarity creates a quiet sense of safety and belonging that many retirees didn't realize they were missing until they found it. Healthcare access is another understated advantage. Fulton benefits from nearby medical services in Rockport and the larger hospital systems in Corpus Christi, offering reassurance without forcing retirees into a larger city environment. The lifestyle here is built around simple routines rather than packed schedules. Fishing, walking along the bay, watching birds, sitting on porches, and meeting the same faces at the same places become the structure of the day. Here's the honest truth that makes Fulton such a good fit for some and a poor one for others. This town does not entertain you. Dining options are limited, nightlife barely exists, and shopping requires planning. For retirees who still crave variety, stimulation, and constant novelty, Fulton can feel slow to the point of discomfort. For those who want predictability, emotional quiet, and a place where days feel longer instead of shorter, Fulton starts to feel like relief. The longer people live here, the more they tend to appreciate how little the town demands from them. Expenses stay more predictable, stress levels drop, and time stops feeling like something that needs to be filled. Fulton, Texas rewards slowing down because it was never designed to rush you in the first place. And for retirees who are ready to trade excitement for ease, that quiet consistency often becomes the most valuable luxury of all. Palacios, Texas. Texas, best kept coastal secret. Palacios, Texas is one of those places that quietly exposes how much of the Texas coast has been distorted by hype, because it offers something most people assume no longer exists: genuinely affordable coastal living that actually works long term. Sitting on Matagorda Bay, Palacios is not a resort town, not a vacation brand, and not a place chasing outside attention. What surprised me when researching Palacios is how intentionally practical it feels. This town was built around shrimping, commercial fishing, and port activity, not tourism. And that foundation still shapes daily life in ways retirees often find refreshing. Housing prices here remain among the lowest on the Texas coast, including homes near the water, because demand has stayed local instead of speculative. You're not competing with investors chasing short-term rental income or second-home buyers treating the town like a seasonal escape. That single factor alone keeps Palacios financially livable for retirees on fixed incomes. The bayfront setting changes everything. Instead of open Gulf exposure, you get calmer water, fewer storm surges, and a coastal environment that feels more manageable emotionally and financially. Insurance costs and maintenance tend to be more predictable than in barrier island towns, which is a detail many retirees only learn the hard way elsewhere. Daily life in Palacios moves at a steady, no-drama pace. Traffic is minimal, errands are simple, and the town never flips into a tourist-first mode that makes residents feel like background characters. People recognize each other. Conversations happen without rushing, and the sense of community feels organic rather than curated. Healthcare access is better than most expect for a town this size, with local clinics handling routine needs and regional hospitals reachable without feeling isolated. The lifestyle here revolves around simple pleasures: fishing from public piers, watching birds along the bay, walking quiet streets, and enjoying waterfront views without crowds. Here's the part you have to be honest about. Palacios does not try to entertain you. Dining options are limited. Nightlife is essentially non-existent, and shopping requires planning ahead. For retirees who still need variety, stimulation, and constant novelty, this town can feel too quiet. For those who value routine, self-directed days, and emotional calm, that quiet becomes the entire appeal. Locals often say, Palacios gives you back time you didn't realize you were spending elsewhere on traffic, noise, and stress. The longer people live here, the more they tend to appreciate how little the town demands from them financially and psychologically. Palacios, Texas works because it never tried to be anything other than what it is: a stable, affordable, working coastal town where retirement feels grounded, predictable, and sustainable instead of performative. Sargent, Texas. The smartest move nobody brags about. Sargent. Texas is the kind of place that never makes glossy retirement lists, and that's exactly why it keeps working while flashier beach towns quietly price people out. Sitting along the Gulf in Matagorda County, Sargent is small, unincorporated, and almost aggressively unpolished, which filters out anyone chasing status instead of sustainability. What surprised me when researching Sargent is how logically sound it is for retirement when you strip away aesthetics and ego. Housing prices here remain among the most affordable on the Texas coast, even for properties with canal access or close proximity to the water. That affordability isn't accidental. Sargent never leaned into tourism, never branded itself as a destination, and never attracted large-scale development. The result is a housing market driven by residents, not investors, which is rare along the Gulf. You'll notice immediately that Sargent runs on practicality. The community is built around fishing, boating, and everyday coastal living, not entertainment or amenities. People move here because they want access to the water, not because they want crowds, nightlife, or constant activity. The canal system allows many residents to fish from their own backyards, which quietly replaces expensive hobbies with simple routines that fill entire days. Here's the part most people don't realize until they live here. Sargent lowers your cost of living not just by being cheaper, but by removing the temptation to spend. There are limited restaurants, minimal shopping, and almost no tourist-driven pricing pressure, which means retirement budgets stretch further without feeling restrictive. The coastal environment here is raw but manageable. Being outside major tourist corridors keeps traffic low and stress even lower. Storm exposure and coastal weather are realities, but they're realities residents plan for rather than panic about, and home ownership decisions tend to be conservative and practical as a result. Insurance and maintenance still matter, but prices stay grounded compared to barrier island towns driven by demand spikes. Healthcare access requires driving to nearby towns, which is something retirees must be comfortable with. But many residents see that trade-off as worth it for the peace they gain daily. Community life in Sargent feels informal and genuine. Neighbors look out for each other because there's no infrastructure pretending to do it for them. Days revolve around tides, weather, and personal routines rather than schedules or obligations. Here's the honest truth that makes Sargent such a sleeper pick. This town gives you almost nothing to brag about. No trendy restaurants, no nightlife, no polished downtown. What it gives you instead is financial breathing room, quiet mornings, predictable expenses, and the kind of calm that sneaks up on you over time. Sargent, Texas works because it never tries to impress. And for retirees who value stability, affordability, and freedom over appearances, that quiet competence often makes it the smartest move nobody talks about. Why some Texas beach towns stay affordable while others explode. Here's the part most people never hear when they're comparing Texas beach towns for retirement. Affordability isn't random, and it's not about luck. What surprised me when pulling together housing data, population trends, and local development patterns is how predictable the split actually is. Texas beach towns that explode in price usually follow the same path. They attract heavy tourism, then short-term rentals, then outside investors, and finally buyers who don't plan to live there full-time. Once that cycle starts, prices disconnect from local incomes and retirees end up competing with vacation demand instead of neighbors. Towns like this become lifestyle brands, not communities. And the cost of entry keeps rising even when daily livability doesn't improve. On the other side, towns that stay affordable tend to share a completely different DNA. They're working coastal towns built around fishing, shipping, or long-term residents rather than visitors. They sit on bays instead of barrier islands, which reduces storm exposure and insurance pressure. They avoid large-scale resort development and never position themselves as must-see destinations. That lack of hype is not a flaw, it's a shield. When a town doesn't market itself, investors stay away. Housing stays tied to real demand, and retirees aren't priced out by people who only show up for a few weekends a year. You'll notice another pattern when you look closer. Affordable Texas beach towns usually have limited entertainment and fewer amenities, which sounds negative until you realize what it does to your budget and stress levels. Fewer attractions mean fewer crowds, fewer seasonal price spikes, and fewer reasons for developers to flood the area with luxury projects. These towns don't explode because there's nothing to flip quickly. They grow slowly, if at all. And that stability is exactly what many retirees quietly want. Infrastructure also plays a role. Towns farther from major metros or without direct highway access are less appealing to mass tourism, but ideal for people who don't need constant stimulation. Healthcare access tends to be regional rather than local, which filters out buyers who want convenience over calm. Here's the weird part: most people don't connect until it's too late. Exploding prices don't just raise housing costs, they change the personality of a town. As prices rise, full-time residents leave, services shift toward visitors, and daily life starts revolving around seasons instead of routines. Affordable towns keep their character because the people who live there are the people the town is built for. This is why some Texas beach towns remain livable decade after decade, while others feel exciting for a year and exhausting forever. The smartest retirement moves usually happen where no one is bragging, no one is rushing, and no one is trying to turn the town into something it was never meant to be. If you're still chasing popular, you're already late. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to face when planning a Texas beach retirement. If you're still chasing the popular towns, you're already late to the advantage. What surprised me when studying long-term patterns along the Texas coast is how reliably this happens. Popularity never shows up alone. It brings rising home prices, higher insurance costs, crowded roads, stretched services, and a lifestyle that quietly shifts away from residents and toward visitors. The moment a town becomes a regular recommendation, the conditions that made it appealing are already changing. Retirees who chase name recognition often pay more for less calm, less community, and fewer choices later on. You can feel it when a town crosses that line. Life starts revolving around tourist seasons instead of personal routines. Neighbors rotate instead of settling. Local businesses cater to short stays instead of long lives. The place still photographs well, but it stops functioning as a refuge. The smartest retirement moves usually look boring at first glance. They are quiet, overlooked, and rarely bragged about. Underrated Texas beach towns stay affordable because they don't reward speculation and don't market themselves as dreams. They're built for people who live there every day. These places offer something popularity never does: stability, predictability, and financial breathing room. If you're still chasing the most talked about Texas beach town, you're competing with trends instead of designing a life. The real opportunity lives where no one is rushing, no one is flexing, and no one is trying to turn the town into something it was never meant to be.